I'm Lucy Martin, 30 years old, and last month I learned exactly how disposable I was to my own family. The message came through while I was finishing dinner, my phone lighting up with a text from my brother Daniel. "Hey, guest list finalized. Had to make some tough cuts. Hope you understand. Love you." My hands froze over the plate. Tough cuts. I wasn't a coworker or a college friend. I was his sister. I stared at the words until they blurred, wondering how my name had somehow become optional in his life. By the time I called my mom for an explanation, I already knew the answer, but hearing her tone still broke something in me. Before I go any further, let me know where you're listening from in the comments and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to hold your head high when someone tried to make you feel small. Mom answered on the second ring, cheerful as always, as if my voice hadn't just cracked with hurt. "Oh, honey, it's just a wedding," she said, sighing like I was being childish. That tone had followed me my whole life, the one she used when she wanted me to back down. She told me Daniel and Emily had to keep the guest list small, that weddings were expensive. I clenched my jaw because I'd already seen Emily's post online showing rows of tables and a caption boasting 150 guests and counting. I wanted to scream that I wasn't a number to be trimmed. Instead, I just listened to my mother's voice float on, telling me not to make a scene. I hung up before she could say more, and the silence that followed felt like a lifetime of being erased. Growing up, I'd always been the steady one. Daniel was the spark, the dreamer, the one Mom called our future success story. When he was little, I was the one who helped with his science projects, tied his shoes before picture day, and later stayed up late, proofreading his essays through college. When he broke his wrist during finals, I typed his entire research paper as he dictated from the couch. When his rent came up short, I quietly slipped him money so he wouldn't have to admit it to our parents. I didn't keep count, that's what family did, or so I thought. But looking back, it was always one-directional. I gave, they took, and when it was time to give something as small as a chair at a wedding, there wasn't one left for me. Our family had always cared too much about appearances. Mom loved having things look perfect, the matching sweaters at Christmas, the glossy family photos on the wall, the carefully worded holiday letters, bragging about Daniel's promotions and Emily's new business. My name was usually an afterthought tucked between polite lines, like Lucy's doing fine at work. I never complained, never wanted to cause ripples. I told myself I was being mature, keeping peace. But peace without respect is just silence dressed up nice. That night, staring at the text on my phone, I realized how long I'd been living in that silence. I sat on my bed, scrolling through old photos, Daniel and me at the lake. Daniel grinning in his cap and gown, me cheering him on. Every memory that once warmed me now cut deep. When Emily first joined the family, I'd welcomed her with open arms. I helped her pick out engagement decorations, even threw her a bridal shower at my own expense. Maybe that was my mistake, assuming kindness would come back around. It didn't. Instead, I was told I wasn't essential to the biggest day of my own brother's life, and the worst part wasn't being excluded, it was realizing how easy it was for them to do it. I tried to sleep that night, but my mind wouldn't stop replaying every slight I'd swallowed over the years, the birthdays forgotten, the plans canceled last minute, the way Mom always said, "You're stronger, Lucy. You understand." It had been her way of excusing the favoritism. Stronger meant invisible. Understanding meant expendable. By dawn, the tears had dried, replaced by something steadier, heavier. I wasn't going to beg for a seat at a table I was never welcome at. I wasn't going to cry to people who'd trained me to disappear. If they didn't want me there, then they could have their perfect wedding without me, and I'd find my own peace somewhere far away. The first hint of sunlight slipped through the blinds as I sat up, heart pounding with a strange mix of anger and relief. I didn't know where I was going yet, only that I had to leave. The air in that apartment, filled with old habits and quiet compliance, suddenly felt suffocating. I turned on my laptop, stared at the blank browser bar, and typed one-word flights. Rows of destinations filled the screen: Miami, Cancun, Turks, and Caicos. Places where no one knew me, where I could start breathing again. Somewhere warm, somewhere beautiful, somewhere that didn't carry my family's shadows. When I finally closed the laptop, the decision had already been made. I wasn't running away. I was stepping out of the role they'd written for me. The good daughter, the peacemaker, the reliable one. That part of my life ended the moment Daniel hit send. I lay back on the bed, my heart still racing, and whispered to the quiet room, "If they don't want me there, fine. But they'll remember what it feels like when I'm gone." And with that, I had no idea yet that my absence would echo louder than I ever imagined. I didn't sleep much that night. The glow from my laptop still faintly lit the room, casting lines of light across the floor. Every thought circled back to that message, to my mother's sigh, to the way my voice had sounded so small on the phone. For years I had learned to swallow things like that, birthdays, forgotten sacrifices brushed aside, but this time something inside me was shifting. The silence didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt suffocating. By morning, that restless energy had hardened into resolve. I opened my laptop again, the cursor blinking like a dare. Flights, hotels, anywhere that wasn't here. Pictures of turquoise water and white sand filled the screen, each one more inviting than the last. For a moment I hesitated, old habits whispering that it was wasteful, that I should be practical. Then I remembered the years of practicality that had earned me nothing but being written out of my brother's life. I clicked Book Now without another thought. The confirmation email landed in my inbox seconds later, and I sat back, heart pounding, the corners of my mouth lifting into a quiet smile. If I was going to be excluded, I'd do it on my own terms. I pulled my old suitcase from the closet, the zipper sticking where the metal had worn down. Dust puffed into the air as I unzipped it, a sound that somehow felt like thunder in the quiet apartment. The last time I'd used it, Daniel had borrowed it for a work trip I helped him pay for. I shook my head and started folding clothes, sliding swimsuits, sundresses, and sandals into neat stacks. It wasn't just packing. Each piece I added felt like reclaiming space, one for every time I'd been told to understand one, for every smile I'd faked while swallowing disappointment. The buzz of my phone cut through the moment. A text from Mom flashed across the screen. "Don't sulk, honey. It's just a wedding. We'll celebrate something else together soon." I stared at the words until they blurred. Celebrate what? My absence. I set the phone down, resisting the urge to reply, then opened my camera instead. The suitcase lay open on the bed, bright colors spilling over the edge. I snapped a picture typed "New Adventure Loading" and posted it to my story. It wasn't revenge. It was proof to myself that I was finally doing something for me. By evening, the comments began rolling in. Melissa sent a string of heart emojis. A few friends wrote, "Where are you going?" or "Finally treating yourself." Even a coworker added a cheerful, "Good for you, Lucy." But what caught my eye was the last notification. "Daniel Martin viewed your story. No message, no emoji, just that one word, seen." I exhaled slowly, the tension leaving my shoulders. For the first time in years, I had nothing left to explain. That night, I poured a glass of wine and sat on the couch, suitcase zipped and ready beside me. Outside, city lights flickered across the street, reflecting faintly in the window. Somewhere I imagined my family finalizing seating charts, arranging flowers, too busy to notice the space where I should have been. But they would notice soon enough. I raised my glass and whispered softly to the empty room, "Here's to not waiting for permission anymore." The clink of glass against air sounded small, but it was enough. 2 days later, I rolled my suitcase through the airport, my pulse quick and light. The steady hum of voices, the smell of coffee, the faint echo of announcements. It all felt like music. For once, I wasn't traveling for anyone else. My ticket was first class, something I'd always dismissed as too much. When I turned left instead of right, after boarding, the wide leather seat and soft lighting felt like stepping into another life. The flight attendant handed me a glass of champagne before takeoff, and as I lifted it, I caught my reflection in the window, calm, composed, a woman I was only beginning to recognize. To me, I murmured, letting the bubbles touch my lips. I took a photo, legs stretched out, clouds beyond the glass, and captioned it, "Didn't make the wedding guest list, but I think I'll survive." Within minutes, messages poured in again. Melissa replied first, iconic. Aunt Karen wrote, "Good for you, sweetheart." Even people I hadn't heard from in years commented, "Living the dream." Then my screen lit up again, Mom. I stared at her name for a long second before opening it. "Lucy, are you seriously skipping your brother's wedding over this? Don't be petty." I almost laughed. Petty. The word had been thrown at me my entire life used to shame me whenever I dared to feel hurt. But this didn't feel petty. It felt powerful. I set the phone face down on the tray and leaned back, the hum of the engines filling the silence. Out the window, the clouds stretched endlessly glowing pink against the setting sun. I raised my glass again and whispered one word that had started to taste sweet on my tongue: perspective. When the plane landed, the Caribbean air wrapped around me, warm and fragrant with salt and flowers. The driver waiting outside the terminal held a sign with my name, and for once it felt like the universe was expecting me. The SUV was cool and quiet inside, stocked with chilled towels and bottled water. As we drove toward the resort, the horizon opened wide, the ocean shifting from deep blue to shimmering turquoise. I leaned my head against the seat, closing my eyes, as the hum of the tires blended with the rhythm of the waves. For the first time in years, I wasn't the backup plan. I wasn't the fixer or the peacekeeper. I was simply free. The resort was even more beautiful than the pictures. Palm trees lined a marble walkway that led into an open-air lobby, sunlight glinting off polished stone floors. A smiling attendant handed me a cool drink before I'd even reached the front desk. My suite overlooked the ocean with floor-to-ceiling windows and a balcony that seemed to spill right into the sea. I threw open the doors, letting the sound of the waves roll through the room, and stood there for a moment, just breathing it in. This was the peace I'd been craving. No expectations, no guilt, no endless apologizing for existing. That first evening, I ordered room service pancakes and fresh fruit, even though it was dinner time, because why not? I ate on the balcony in a robe, my hair still damp from the shower, the sun melting into the horizon. Below me, waves shimmered like liquid glass. I didn't check my phone. I didn't think about the wedding or the people planning it. For once, the quiet felt like comfort instead of punishment. The next morning, I woke to the soft sound of waves brushing the shore. Light filled the room, golden and warm. I slipped on a sundress, wandered down to the pool, and settled into a lounge chair by the water. A waiter appeared with a smile, setting down a martini without being asked. I thanked him, stretched my legs, and felt something inside me unclench that had been tight for years. I snapped a photo of the glittering pool, captioning it, "When one door closes, another one opens, preferably to a beachside suite with unlimited margaritas." Within minutes, my phone buzzed with laughing emojis and comments. But soon other names began to appear. Mom, Daniel, Grandma. I watched the screen light up with incoming calls one after another until the sound became a low vibration under the music from the bar. I turned the phone over and closed my eyes, letting the sun soak into my skin. Whatever they needed, whatever crisis was unraveling back home, it could wait. I had given them my time, my money, my patience, and my peace. Now, for once, all of that belonged to me. The waves crashed softly beyond the pool, steady and calm, and as I sipped my drink, a quiet certainty settled in. Whatever was happening back home, whatever storm was building, I wasn't going to be the one to weather it for them. Not this time. And as the sun began to dip low, painting the water in gold and rose, I had no idea how poetic that promise would soon become. The sound of the waves drifted through the balcony doors, mingling with the faint hum of music from the pool below. I lay back on the lounge chair, sunlight warming my skin, a half-melted drink beside me. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel that constant tug of responsibility, the pressure to fix, to smooth things over, to make everyone else comfortable. My phone lay face down on the table, but it still pulsed with silent notifications I refused to check. I had promised myself this week would be different. No obligations, no guilt. Just quiet. By mid-afternoon, the warmth lulled me into a peaceful haze. The air smelled of salt and sunscreen, and the distant laughter of strangers filled the space my family used to occupy in my mind. I might have drifted into sleep if not for the faint vibration against the table. Another message, another reminder of the world I'd left behind. I ignored it at first, but then the phone buzzed again, then again, the rhythm growing insistent until curiosity broke through my calm. I reached for it expecting another guilt-ridden text from Mom. Instead, the name on the screen stopped me cold. Jake Harper. I hadn't heard from Jake in months. He was Melissa's brother, the cousin who said what everyone else avoided. I opened the message and blinked at the words. "You are not going to believe what just happened." My stomach tightened. Before I could type back, another text appeared. "The wedding's a disaster. Call me." I hesitated, staring at the screen as the notifications kept piling up. Missed calls from Mom, from Daniel, even one from Emily. My chest tightened, the sense of calm I'd fought for slipping away. Finally, I tapped Jake's name and called him. He picked up immediately, his voice low and almost breathless. "Lucy." "You sitting down?" I frowned, leaning forward. "I'm on vacation, Jake. What's going on?" He exhaled sharply like he was holding back laughter. Daniel walked out. The groom literally left his own wedding. For a second, I thought I'd misheard. "He what?" "He left," Jake repeated. "Big fight with Emily. She was crying, shouting at him in front of everyone. Then he just walked out. Dad and Uncle Rob started yelling about family reputation. Grandma's in tears. It's chaos." I stared out at the ocean. The sunlight too bright suddenly. "You're serious." "Dead serious," he said. "The bar shut down early. The guests are leaving and your mom's losing her mind. Everyone's saying it's cursed or something." I didn't know what to say. The same family who had cut me out without hesitation was now unraveling without me. I could hear the commotion in Jake's background voices rising. Someone crying, glass clinking, and the faint sound of my mother's voice barking orders. "Lucy," Jake added quietly. "They're all asking for you. Mom keeps saying you need to fix this." That old instinct to jump in, to soothe, to hold everything together flickered in my chest. It was familiar, but this time it stopped short. I let the silence stretch, then said softly, "Jake, I'm not coming." He hesitated. "Didn't think you would. Just figured you should know." "Thanks," I said. Then ended the call before the guilt could creep in. For a long time I sat there, the sound of the ocean rushing in and out like a metronome for my thoughts. Then slowly, a quiet laugh bubbled up before I could stop it. It wasn't cruel, just disbelief, a kind of release that came from realizing I wasn't the one in pieces this time. I lifted my drink, held it up to the sunlight, and whispered, "To Karma." By evening, my phone was a wall of missed calls. Mom's name filled half the screen. Daniel's came next, then Emily's. I poured myself a glass of wine from the minibar and carried it out to the balcony, the air warm and still. One by one, I played the voicemails, the voices on the other end, frantic, pleading, angry. Mom's came first. "Lucy, I don't know what you think you're doing, but this isn't the time for one of your moods. Your brother needs you. This family needs you." I rolled my eyes, letting the message play out until the click of the disconnect. The next one was shakier. "Emily, Lucy, please. I know we haven't always been close, but Daniel's losing it. Everyone's fighting. You're the only one who can calm him down." Her voice cracked on the last words, and I could almost picture her, the perfect bride, undone makeup, streaked, control slipping. I took another sip of wine and moved to the next message. Jake again, whispering this time like he was hiding. "Just so you know, Mom and Aunt Lisa are talking about showing up at your apartment when you get back. Grandma keeps saying the wedding was cursed because you weren't there. It's honestly hilarious." I had to pause, the message laughter catching in my throat. The irony was almost too much. The girl who hadn't even made the guest list was now the missing piece they blamed it all on. I opened my messages and typed back to Emily. "Sorry, I'm a little busy, enjoying my overreaction. Hope the wedding was fun." I stared at it for a moment, then hit send. Before I could second guess, I blocked her number. Then Mom's. Then Daniel's. Jake I left. He'd earned that. The silence that followed was immediate, deep, and strangely peaceful. Later that night, I ordered dessert from room service, molten chocolate cake, and another glass of wine. I took them out to the balcony, where the moonlight shimmered across the water. The sweetness melted on my tongue as I listened to the waves. Somewhere back home, my family was probably still arguing, still blaming, still pretending they knew what was best for everyone. But for the first time, their chaos didn't touch me. I didn't owe them an explanation or a solution. I leaned back in the chair, raising my glass to the night sky. "To freedom," I whispered. The word lingered in the air like a promise. For once, I wasn't their fixer or their fallback plan. I was just me, and that was enough. The next morning, I woke to sunlight spilling across the bed and the soft knock of room service at the door. Pancakes, mango slices, and a sparkling mimosa waited on the tray. I carried it out to the balcony, the horizon painted in pale gold. My phone sat silent beside me, still on Do Not Disturb. I took a deep breath, tasting the salt in the air, and realized how light I felt. No guilt, no expectations, just peace. When I finally turned my phone on, more messages appeared, the same names, the same panic. I didn't open any of them. Instead, I took a photo of my breakfast, the sea behind it, and posted it with a quiet caption, "Starting the day, stress-free. Hope everyone back home is doing okay." I smiled as I watched it upload, imagining the ripple it would cause. Then I set the phone down, stretched out my legs, and let the sun wash over me. I didn't know what the next few hours would bring, only that for once I wouldn't be answering calls from the people who never listened until the silence became unbearable. Somewhere, my family's world was spinning, and mine had finally stopped. And as I took another sip of my mimosa, I couldn't shake the sense that the universe wasn't finished with this story yet. By the third morning at the resort, the sky stretched wide and blue above me, unbothered by the chaos I'd left behind. The ocean shimmered like liquid glass, and the air smelled faintly of mango and salt. I had turned my phone on out of habit, not intention, and the screen lit up with another flood of missed calls. Mom, Daniel, Emily. Even a few numbers I didn't recognize. I watched them roll in unread and unanswered before pressing Do Not Disturb again. The silence that followed was sweeter than the sound of any apology. Room service had just cleared my breakfast tray when a new notification flashed across the screen, Melissa Harper. I smiled, hesitating for a moment before opening it. Her text read, "Okay, I know you're ignoring everyone, but call me. You're going to love this." I sighed, half expecting it to be another attempt to drag me into the family drama, but Melissa rarely reached out unless it was worth hearing. I called her. She answered on the first ring, her voice bubbling with energy. "Lucy, finally, sit down. You're about to die laughing." I chuckled, glancing out at the ocean. I'm already sitting. "What's going on now?" "Oh, you have no idea," she said, breathless. So after the groom stormed out, "Yes, your brother, the great Daniel Martin." Emily completely lost it. I mean, full meltdown, crying, screaming mascara everywhere. She threw her bouquet across the room and nearly hit Aunt Lisa. I covered my mouth, trying not to laugh. "You're kidding. I wish." Then Aunt Lisa muttered something about the family being cursed, and Grandma June jumped in, and you know how Grandma gets when she's had enough. I straightened, curious. What did she say? She told Emily and I, quote, "If you'd treated family better, you wouldn't be standing alone in your wedding dress right now." I burst out laughing, the sound carrying over the hum of the waves. "She didn't—" "She did," Melissa said, laughing along. In front of everyone. Even the photographer stopped taking pictures. It was glorious. I leaned back against the lounge chair, the image so vivid I could almost see it. Emily's perfect world cracking apart in the one way that mattered most to her. Please tell me someone got that on video. "Oh, I'm sure someone did," Melissa said between giggles. "But wait, it gets better. When your mom tried to calm Grandma down, she started blaming Daniel instead, saying he'd embarrassed the family. Grandma shot back that Ellen should have thought about embarrassment before cutting her granddaughter out of the wedding. The entire room went silent. You could hear the candles flickering. For a moment, I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Grandma June had never been one for subtlety, but she'd also never spoken up like that for me before. "So what happened after that?" I asked. "Chaos," Melissa said simply. "Daniel's best man tried to get him to come back, but he refused. Emily locked herself in the bridal suite, crying about how this ruined her career. Apparently she'd hired a magazine to feature the ceremony. Oh, and get this, the magazine people walked out when Daniel did. I couldn't help it. I laughed until my stomach hurt, tears streaming down my face. "You're serious?" "Dead serious," she replied. "And you know what your mom's doing now? She's blaming me for not convincing you to come home. She says none of this would have happened if you'd been there to keep the peace." "Of course she is," I said, shaking my head. Because nothing says family accountability like pointing fingers. Melissa exhaled into the phone, her tone softening. Honestly, Lucy, it's kind of poetic. You spent years holding that family together. The one time you walk away, it all falls apart. It's like the universe made its point for you. I watched the sunlight ripple across the waves, the words sinking in. Maybe it did, I said quietly. For a while, we just listened to each other breathe me, surrounded by the soft rush of the ocean, her still somewhere in that storm of a family gathering. Then she added, Grandma told everyone she's coming to visit you when she's done dealing with fools. I think you've officially become her favorite. That made me laugh again. Well, that's a first. Enjoy it, Melissa said warmly. You've earned it. When we hung up, I sat there for a long time, letting the laughter fade into quiet. The sky was beginning to turn gold with the late afternoon light, and the waves rolled steady and unbothered. For the first time since this whole thing began, I didn't feel like a shadow cast by someone else's story. I felt like the person writing my own. Later that evening, I decided to celebrate not out of spite, but out of relief. I booked a spot on the resort's sunset cruise, the kind that came with dinner and soft jazz floating over the water. When I boarded the yacht, the crew greeted me by name, their smiles easy and genuine. The air was warm and full of salt, and as the boat drifted away from shore, the island lights faded into the distance. I stood by the railing, the ocean wind tugging at my hair, and watched the sun sink behind a streak of crimson clouds. Dinner was served on deck, white tablecloths fluttering in the breeze. A glass of champagne glowed in the candlelight beside my plate. The couple seated across from me chatted quietly, their laughter soft, and for once I didn't feel out of place sitting alone. I was exactly where I needed to be. I lifted the glass and snapped a quick photo, the horizon ablaze with color, the bubbles catching the last of the light. Zero regrets, I typed beneath it before setting my phone aside. When I checked it later, the post had already exploded with comments. Living the dream, one coworker wrote. You're glowing, said another. Melissa's reply made me laugh. Iconic. Keep it up, Queen. I set the phone down smiling and turned back to the ocean. The water shimmered under the moonlight, endless and calm, and I thought about how far I'd come from that night staring at a text that told me I wasn't invited. Now I was the one choosing who got access to my piece, and for once, no one else was holding the pen. Back in my suite later that night, I opened the balcony doors wide and stepped out into the humid air. The resort was quiet, the sounds of laughter and music drifting faintly from the beach below. My phone buzzed again on the table, another string of messages, another missed call. Mom Daniel, even a number labeled private. I didn't need to listen to know what they wanted, damage control. I poured another glass of wine instead and leaned against the railing, watching the moon trail a silver path across the water. Somewhere behind all those messages was a version of me that would have picked up, that would have rushed to smooth everything over. But she was gone now, left behind with the old expectations and the endless apologies. The woman standing here had drawn a line, and she wasn't stepping back across it. The breeze lifted, carrying the scent of salt and flowers, and I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling the quiet press of peace around me. Tomorrow I'd wake to sunlight and the sound of waves again. Whatever storms waited back home could rage without me. I took a final sip of wine, set the glass down, and whispered softly into the night air, they wanted a wedding without me. Now they can have the aftermath too. Somewhere far away, my phone buzzed again, unanswered. I turned off the light, leaving only the sound of the sea. What I didn't know then was that the next message waiting for me would change everything once more. The message came the next morning while I was pouring a second cup of coffee on the balcony. The ocean stretched wide before me, calm and endless, a reminder that peace could still exist somewhere in the world. My phone buzzed against the small glass table. I let it vibrate twice before looking. The name flashing across the screen made me exhale sharply. Daniel. I hesitated, thumb hovering, then opened the text. Lucy, please. We can talk about the guest list later, but right now I need you. Don't abandon me like this. I stared at the words for a long moment, the breeze catching strands of my hair as if trying to pull me back to earth. Don't abandon me. The irony would have been funny if it hadn't felt so familiar. Daniel, who had so easily erased me from his wedding, now needed rescuing. The same brother I had stayed up nights comforting after breakups, covering rent, rewriting his resumes, now reaching out because the life he'd built without me was collapsing. I set the phone down beside my coffee and let the sound of the waves drown out the memory of his pleading voice. For years I had answered that call immediately. I would have dropped everything, booked the first flight home, and walked into that chaos with open arms. But this time my hands were still. I picked up my mug and watched a small white sailboat drift across the horizon, a tiny speck moving steadily toward open water. For once, I didn't feel responsible for keeping anyone else afloat. An hour later, another message appeared, Mom this time. You need to stop acting like a child and come home. We'll sit down as a family and fix this. I almost laughed. That word again, fix. My entire life had revolved around it. Fix the mood, fix the argument, fix Daniel's mistakes, fix Mom's embarrassment. The idea that I was supposed to swoop in and repair a wedding I hadn't even been invited to was almost absurd. Still, I could feel the weight of it pressing against me, the old habit of guilt, tugging like a leash I'd almost forgotten was there. Then came another buzz, Melissa. Her timing was uncanny. Heads up, your mom is organizing a family meeting when you get back. Just thought you should know. I smiled at her predictability, typed back, Thanks for the warning, but I won't be there. It took less than a minute for her response to appear. Wait, what do you mean? I set my phone down again and leaned back in the chair, the sunlight spilling across my legs. I knew exactly what I meant. That afternoon, I pulled my laptop onto my lap and opened my booking confirmation. My stay was supposed to end in 2 days, but the thought of returning to that house, to that suffocating performance of concern and control, made my stomach twist. The resort's website loaded with a soft chime, the cursor blinking beside extend stay. My fingers hesitated for a moment, then typed in another week. When the new confirmation email landed in my inbox, I felt something in my chest unclench. 1 more week of silence, 1 more week of my own company. By sunset, the decision had settled deep in me. The sky was streaked with coral and gold as I carried a glass of wine out to the beach. The sand was cool beneath my feet, the tide washing in and out in steady rhythm. Behind me, the resort lights flickered on warm and inviting. Ahead, the ocean stretched infinite. Somewhere between those two worlds, comfort and freedom. I found myself standing still for the first time in years. I wandered along the shore until the stars came out, then sat down near the water's edge, my toes sinking into the wet sand. My phone buzzed again, and though I told myself not to look, I did. A new group message, Mom, Daniel, Emily, the same trio that had so easily excluded me. The message glowed against the dark screen. Oh, so now you want me around? Sorry, I'm too busy enjoying my overreaction. Have fun cleaning up your own messes. I hit send before I could second-guess it, watching the words disappear into the void. Then calmly, deliberately, I blocked them all. The silence afterward wasn't empty. It was full of space I hadn't had before, full of peace that didn't need permission. I set the phone down in the sand beside me, the ocean breeze drying the faint trace of salt on my skin. Behind me, laughter floated from the bar music, soft and far away. I leaned back on my hands, gazing at the stars overhead, and whispered, "To freedom." The words blended into the night, like a quiet prayer carried away by the wind. The next morning, I woke up lighter. No tension, no dread, just the hum of the waves and the faint smell of coffee drifting in from the open balcony doors. I wrapped myself in a robe and stepped outside, watching the sunlight glitter on the water. A waiter below was setting tables for breakfast, the clink of dishes echoing through the still air. For the first time, I didn't rush. I didn't reach for my phone, didn't check notifications or emails. I just stood there breathing in the day. After breakfast, I wandered down to the beach again, my feet sinking into the warm sand. The resort staff had started to recognize me. The bartender waved from under the thatched roof, and one of the housekeepers smiled as she passed. There was a quiet rhythm to the place, one that didn't ask anything from me. I ordered a tropical cocktail, found a shaded cabana near the water, and settled in with a book I never planned to finish. Time moved differently there. The day stretched and softened, the hours blurring into the steady pulse of waves against the shore. Every now and then, I'd hear my phone buzz faintly from the bag beside me, but I didn't reach for it. I already knew what waited there: guilt demands, apologies that weren't really apologies. I had spent too many years translating those words into meaning. This time I chose silence. By late afternoon, the sky turned pale orange, the light fading into something almost golden. I ordered one last drink, something sweet, something cold, and raised the glass toward the horizon. To peace, I murmured the words slipping out without thought. The sea breeze caught them, carrying them away, just like before. When I returned to my room that evening, the voicemail light on my phone blinked faintly, but I didn't press play. I poured myself another glass of wine, drew the curtains open, and sat on the edge of the bed, watching the last light fade over the water. Somewhere behind that horizon was the life I'd always known, the expectations, the demands, the endless cycle of fixing what other people broke. But here for the first time I wasn't anyone's solution. I was simply myself. As the moon rose high over the ocean, I turned off every light in the room, letting the silver glow wash across the floor. I stretched out on the bed, listening to the waves roll in steady and sure. My mind felt still, no noise, no worry, no voice telling me to go home. Just quiet. Before I fell asleep, I reached for my phone one last time. The screen lit up a single message from Melissa at the top. "Good for you. Don't let them pull you back." I smiled, locked the screen, and set it face down on the nightstand. Tomorrow could wait. Tonight belonged to me. And somewhere deep down, as the tide whispered against the shore, I knew this wasn't the end of the story, just the calm before the next wave. The morning after I extended my stay, sunlight spilled across the sheets, painting the room in soft gold. I stretched beneath the linen covers, the faint sound of waves drifting through the open balcony doors. For the first time in years, I woke up with no one expecting me to fix anything. I made coffee, carried the mug outside, and watched the horizon blur into the sky. The world felt wide again, open and quiet. My phone sat face down on the table beside me, but the flashing light eventually caught my attention. I sighed, turned it over, and saw another string of missed calls. My mother's name filled the list, followed by Daniel's, and one from a number I didn't recognize. I should have ignored them all. But curiosity, that old weakness, tugged at me. I pressed play on the first voicemail. Mom's voice came through sharp and rehearsed like she was performing for an audience. "Lucy, when you get back, we're having a family meeting. This nonsense has gone far enough. We need to talk about what you've done." There was a long pause before the message ended, the silence louder than her words. I moved to the next one. Daniel's voice cracked with tension. "Please, Lucy, just answer. You don't understand what's happening. We can fix this. Don't make things worse." I set the phone down and took a slow breath. The irony wasn't lost on me, the people who had shut me out now acting as if I held the power to make everything right. I stood there for a long time, the coffee cooling in my hands, before finally setting the mug aside. There was nothing left to fix. Not for them, and not for me. Later that morning, I wandered to the resort cafe. The staff greeted me with easy smiles, remembering my name. I sat by the window, ordered breakfast, and let the calm chatter of strangers fill the space that guilt used to occupy. Outside, couples strolled along the beach, laughter carrying on the wind. It was a kind of life I'd always watched from the edges, simple, unhurried, untouched by other people's chaos. Halfway through breakfast, my phone buzzed again. "Melissa Harper." I smiled and answered. "Hey, you're up early." Her laugh came light through the line. "Barely. I just wanted to make sure you're surviving the family circus from a safe distance." "Surviving just fine," I said, stirring my coffee. "Though apparently I'm the star of the show without even being there." "You have no idea," she said. "Your mom's been calling everyone trying to spin the story. Grandma isn't having it. She told her flat out that Daniel and Emily brought this on themselves." I leaned back in my chair, the corner of my mouth lifting. "Grandma said that—" "Oh, she went further," Melissa said, lowering her voice. "She told your mom that cutting you out was the worst mistake she ever made and that karma has an impeccable sense of timing." I laughed quietly. "Remind me to send her flowers." "You might need to," Melissa said. "Your mom's trying to schedule that family meeting for next weekend. Grandma told her not to expect her there. Apparently, she said, if Lucy has sense, she won't show up either. The image of Grandma June standing her ground against Ellen Martin made me smile wider than I had in days. Good for her, I said softly. Melissa hesitated. You know, Lucy, I think they're panicking because they can't control the story anymore. You walking away, it changed something. They don't know what to do with that. Her words lingered even after the call ended. Control had always been my mother's currency. The moment I stopped giving her reactions, her hold had started to crumble. I finished breakfast, left a generous tip, and stepped outside into the sunlight. The sand was warm beneath my feet, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I was running away from home. I was simply walking toward peace. That afternoon, I booked a massage at the resort spa, letting the scent of lavender and sea salt wash over me as the tension left my body. When it ended, I sat for a while in the lounge, sipping herbal tea, staring at the ocean through the glass walls. My phone lay quiet beside me. It was strange how something so small could once carry the weight of everyone else's demands, and now silence from it felt like freedom. By evening, the sky had turned soft shades of rose and violet. I decided to eat dinner on the beach, where tiki torches flickered against the sand. The waiter recognized me smiling as he poured a glass of wine. "Another beautiful night, Miss Martin," he said. I smiled back. "It really is." Halfway through the meal, I reached for my phone to capture the view, the soft light, the waves glowing under the torches, when a new message appeared on the screen. It wasn't from Mom or Daniel this time. It was from Emily Grant. I stared at her name for a moment, debating whether to open it. Curiosity won again. Lucy. I know I don't deserve to ask you this, but please call me. It's not about the wedding. I just need to talk. I sat back, the fork frozen halfway to my mouth. For a moment, I wondered if this was another ploy, another way for my family to drag me into the mess. But the tone was different. It wasn't polished or rehearsed. It sounded real. I took a sip of wine, staring at the screen, then typed a single reply. Not tonight. The message went silent after that. I put the phone away and turned back to the ocean. The sound of the waves drowned out the rest of the world, and for a while I simply breathed. Later that night, I walked along the shoreline barefoot, the moonlight silver against the water. The tide tugged gently at my feet, cool and rhythmic. Somewhere behind me, music played faintly from the resort bar, but I barely heard it. My thoughts drifted instead to everything that had led here, all the times I had made myself smaller, so my family could feel comfortable, all the times I had accepted less, just to keep the peace. The woman walking this beach wasn't that version anymore. I'd stopped asking for permission to exist in my own story. I paused, looking out toward the horizon, and whispered softly, "I'm done fixing what they break." The wind carried the words away, but it didn't matter. I knew they'd landed exactly where they needed to with me. When I returned to my suite, another notification waited on my phone. A photo from Melissa, a family group text she'd been dragged into. It showed Mom, Daniel, and Emily sitting stiffly at a restaurant table. The caption under it, written by Grandma June herself, read, "3 people, 1 lesson learned too late." I laughed quietly, shaking my head, then set the phone down and turned off the lights. Outside, the ocean kept its steady rhythm, patient and sure. I climbed into bed, the sheets cool against my skin, and let the sound lull me toward sleep. Tomorrow, I'd decide what came next. Whether I stayed another week, another month, or just until I knew the peace was real. For now, I didn't need to plan. The world could spin without me for a while. And somewhere deep in the night, as the waves whispered against the shore, I realized that silence, once something I feared, had become the sound of freedom. The next morning began like any other on the island. Soft light, the sound of waves, and a calm that seemed to move slower than time itself. I sat on the balcony sipping coffee as the sea shifted from gray to blue beneath the rising sun. The world felt still, peaceful, and far away from the noise I'd left behind. My phone rested on the table, silent for once. I thought maybe finally the storm had passed. But peace, I'd learned, rarely stayed untouched. A few minutes later, a new message appeared from Melissa. "You're going to want to hear this. Call me." I hesitated, staring at the screen, then dialed. She answered before the first ring finished, breathless with energy. "Lucy, she said you sitting down." I smiled faintly. "Why do I feel like that's a warning?" "Because it is," she said, half laughing. "You won't believe what just happened. Remember how Emily tried to reach out to you? Well, she went public." "Public," I repeated. "Yep," Melissa said. She posted this long apology online, something about taking responsibility for her part in the wedding disaster, how she shouldn't have listened to other people about guest lists, and how cutting family caused bad karma. I leaned back, the sea breeze brushing my face. "You're kidding." "Oh, I wish," Melissa said. "She tagged Daniel, your mom, everyone. People are eating it up. It's all over social media. And guess whose name she mentioned specifically?" I sighed, already knowing. "Mine." "Bingo," Melissa said. "She called you her biggest regret, said you were always kind and that she let other people influence her decisions. It's weirdly sincere, actually." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. The irony of it all, an apology broadcast to the world, when a simple phone call years ago would have meant everything was almost too much to process. I rubbed my temple, listening, as Melissa continued. "And now your mom's losing it. She's furious. Says Emily's throwing the family under the bus to save her own reputation. Daniel's not saying much, but apparently he's embarrassed. Grandma June thinks it's hilarious." I couldn't help but laugh softly. Of course she does. "Oh, and one more thing," Melissa added. "Emily deleted her engagement photos. All of them. Every trace of Daniel's name is gone. She even changed her bio to something about starting fresh." The image made me shake my head in disbelief. For years, that woman had crafted a picture-perfect life, every moment polished, every smile rehearsed, and now she was erasing it piece by piece. I took a deep breath, letting the sound of the waves fill the silence between us. "You know what," I said finally. "I hope she finds whatever peace she's chasing, just far away from me." Melissa was quiet for a moment. "You really mean that?" "I do," I said. "I don't hate her. I just don't have room for any of it anymore." We talked a little longer, Melissa filling me in on family chatter, Grandma June's unapologetic commentary, and Jake's latest text to her that simply read, "Lucy won." When I finally hung up, I set the phone down and let the quiet return. The truth was, it didn't feel like winning. It just felt like freedom finally settling where guilt used to live. Later that day, I walked into town, the sun high overhead. The streets were lined with small shops and cafes, the kind of places that felt untouched by time. I stopped at a jewelry stand where an older woman with kind eyes showed me simple bracelets made from seashells. One caught my attention, a thin band of silver with a small blue stone at the center. She smiled as I picked it up. "It's for peace," she said softly, "so you remember where you found it." I slipped it onto my wrist. "Then I'll take it." That evening, back at the resort, I sat on the beach with a glass of wine as the sun sank below the horizon. The sky turned shades of copper and rose, the waves shimmering as if the whole ocean had caught fire. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through messages without opening most of them. There were a few from old friends, a handful from coworkers, and one from an unknown number that made me pause. It read simply, "Thank you for not responding in anger. I hope you're happy. Emily." For a moment I considered deleting it, but something in the message stopped me. Maybe it was the rare hint of humility, or maybe I'd just run out of energy for resentment. Either way, I let it stay unread beyond those few words. As night fell, I took another walk along the shore. The resort lights glowed behind me, distant and warm, while the sea stretched endless ahead. Somewhere far away, my family was likely still tangled in blame and explanations, but none of it touched me now. The salt air felt cleaner, the wind softer. Each step in the sand erased the one before it, leaving no trace. When I returned to my suite, a new message blinked on the screen, a photo from Melissa again. This time it wasn't chaos or gossip. It was Grandma June sitting at her kitchen table holding a small handwritten sign that read, "Proud of you, kiddo." The image made my throat tighten. I stared at it for a long moment before typing back, "Tell her I love her." The next morning I woke early and ordered breakfast to the room. The sky was still gray, the horizon barely visible, but the world felt lighter somehow. I sat on the balcony, my plate untouched, and watched as the first light broke through the clouds. My phone buzzed once more, another message from Daniel. I didn't open it right away, but I knew I would this time, not out of obligation, not to fix anything, but to close the chapter completely. When I finally read it, the words were simple. I'm sorry, Lucy, for everything. I was wrong. I let out a slow breath, the sound almost a whisper. There was no need to reply. Some apologies didn't need an audience, they just needed to exist. I locked the screen, set the phone aside, and watched the sun climb higher, the light spilling across the ocean in gold. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be, not as anyone's caretaker or daughter or sister, but simply as myself. As the tide rolled in, touching the edge of the sand with quiet insistence, I knew I'd reached the point of no return. I wasn't going back to the life I had before. I wasn't waiting for anyone else to tell me I'd done enough. The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of salt and jasmine through the air. I lifted my wrist, the blue stone of the bracelet catching the light, and whispered, to peace and to finally letting go. The waves answered in their steady rhythm, and somewhere beyond the horizon, the next chapter of my life waited, still unwritten, but entirely mine. The morning after Daniel's message, the world felt unusually still. The ocean outside my balcony glimmered in quiet shades of silver, and the only sound was the slow rhythm of the waves meeting the shore. I sat there for a long time, holding my coffee, watching sunlight scatter across the water. I hadn't replied to him, and I knew I wouldn't. His apology had come too late to change what mattered, but not too late to end the story with peace instead of bitterness. When I finally packed my suitcase, there was no heaviness this time. My clothes folded easily, my hands steady. The walls that had once held my silence now felt like they had witnessed my rebuilding. Before closing the balcony door, I stepped outside one last time. The air was warm, carrying that familiar mix of salt and hibiscus, the same scent that had greeted me when I first arrived, only now it smelled like closure instead of escape. Downstairs, the driver loaded my bags into the car, smiling as he handed me a bottle of water. Back home, he asked kindly. I hesitated, then nodded. Yes, but maybe not to the same home. He smiled as if he understood exactly what I meant. At the airport, I moved through security without the usual rush. My phone buzzed once another message from Melissa. Grandma says she's proud of you. And she meant it. I smiled softly, typing back, Tell her I love her. I'll visit soon. The flight felt different this time. I didn't order champagne or take photos for show. I just leaned back and let the hum of the engines steady me. Somewhere between the clouds, I realized the version of myself that had boarded that first plane, the woman who'd been excluded, diminished, and dismissed, hadn't survived the return trip. The person flying home now was someone else entirely. When I landed, the city air felt sharper, heavier. But even as I stepped into it, the peace from the island lingered inside me like a quiet anchor. I didn't go straight to my family's house. Instead, I took a cab to my own apartment. The place that had once felt small and lonely now looked warm and full of possibility. I opened the curtains wide, let the light pour in, and unpacked only what I needed. The rest could wait. A few days later, Grandma June called. Her voice, though thin with age, carried that familiar spark. You don't owe anyone explanations, Lucy, she said. You finally learned that peace doesn't need permission. I wish I'd learned that sooner myself. I thanked her softly, my eyes blurring as she added, Don't waste another day shrinking to fit their comfort. That was the last time we spoke about it, and she didn't have to say more. In the weeks that followed, messages from my mother slowed, then stopped. Daniel tried once more something polite, an update about his job, but I didn't reply. Some relationships didn't need dramatic endings. They just needed stillness to fade naturally. Melissa and I talked often, laughing about small things, planning trips that felt more like beginnings than distractions. Life settled into a rhythm that was my own. Sometimes when I walked home from work in the evening, I'd catch glimpses of wedding parties outside restaurants, brides laughing, brothers giving speeches, and a part of me would ache, not from envy, but recognition. Family was supposed to mean safety, yet for so long, it had been where I lost myself. It took being written out of someone else's story to start writing my own. One Sunday morning, I placed a framed photo on my windowsill, me on that beach barefoot, smiling the ocean stretching behind me. I didn't post it online or send it to anyone. It wasn't for proof. It was just a reminder that peace once found doesn't have to be announced to be real. Now, whenever I think back to that message, the one that started it, all the tough cuts and the casual cruelty, I no longer feel anger, just clarity. I was never meant to fight for a seat at their table. I was meant to build one of my own. And in that quiet space, surrounded by people who show up with love, there's always room. If you've ever been told you were too much, too sensitive, too different, remember this. Sometimes the greatest act of strength is walking away from people who can't see your worth, not to prove them wrong, but to protect your peace. Thank you for listening to my story. If it reminded you of your own in some way, take a moment to breathe, to let go, or to share it with someone who needs it. And if you're still learning how to choose yourself, keep going. Peace is waiting for you too.